so let's talk about renovations for like kind of where do you see the industry going? So obviously here in Ontario, building code's changing. It's getting better and better every 5 years. Code changes, which is great. And now they're starting to put more emphasis on air tightness and actual performance of home, like actually getting it tested, as opposed to just saying, yeah, I put R20 in the wall, whatever it may be at the time when the house was built, whatever the code was. But where do you see the industry going now? Whether it's, well, let's talk a little bit about renovations, because they're starting to implement some of those codes into specifically for renovations as well. Is it, I see a really positive future for where it's going, but I think it takes people like the people that we work with to make decisions to start improving the game before the law kind of requires them to, right? Because minimum building code is really the worst possible home you're allowed to build by law, right? So how do we get people to up their game? Where is it going? Thinking about the future, where do you see all of that happening, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road?
The building codes continue to evolve. They continue to improve. From my perspective, they're evolving much more slowly than they could. Mm-hmm. They are the evolution of the building code is restrained by the industry largely. It's not necessarily a political restraint. It's not necessarily restraint by a consumer. The anchors that the code writers are dragging, from my perspective, are in the industry that we work within.
What do you mean?
The lobby to limit the speed at which changes happen within the code are coming, from my perspective, primarily from the large builders who have found a formula that the market is willing to buy. They found a formula that when the market buys, they make money from. Changing that recipe ultimately eats away the producer's bottom line. Mm-hmm. And I suggested earlier in our conversation that there's really two extremes in the industry that we work in. Those one extreme, there's individuals who are doing what they do solely to make money. And then there's others, the other extreme, are doing things really for altruistic reasons. They want to make the world a better place. And I'm not saying that all large developers or all large builders are at that opposite extreme necessarily, but they're probably closer to it than, say, you or I are at.
Yeah, and they have their reasons for doing it, right?
So their lobby efforts are strong, and I believe they are slowing the pace of change
by law, like the change by law. But people can request,
absolutely,
they can definitely. And I always like to use the analogy of like grocery shopping. When people go to the grocery store, when they purchase something, that's a vote, mm-hmm. right? If you're going to buy the Fruit Loops versus the organic fruits and vegetables, that's a vote. Right, so and I think that's very much for our industry. As long as people continue to buy those types of homes, that's what the builders are going to continue to build. I see where they're coming from. Working with sitting around tables with some of those big builders and sitting in rooms, as Terry on or through different associations. I definitely can see both sides of the spectrum and what the issue is. And I think a big issue, especially as a big builder, when you're putting up hundreds of houses or even dozens of houses a year, but even if that's still quite a bit. A big part of that is the industry as a whole in terms of like sub-trades, for example. If you couldn't throw anybody into a house like this and say, they need to kind of understand the whole building as a system, which is where the industry is going. And like, how do we get the sub-trades on board with what we're doing? From the guys who are framing the houses for these big builders, for example, and doing the insulation, the air sealing, how do we get them to understand the importance of what they're doing and how their work is going to affect the work that comes after, but potentially also the work that came before, right? What they did to that could definitely damage the work that was done before. How do we address that and training, and that's a big bill. That's one of the complaints that the builders will have. The guys don't understand how to do it, or they price it way too high, and then the big builders can't make money because they've already sold the house, whatever it may be, right?
I suggested earlier that I thought education was really an imperative part of what we do, and I maintain that in response to your question. Like whether it's a consumer, whether it's a tradesperson, whether it's a building official at the city who's looking at plans going, I don't understand what you're trying to do here. It's the sharing of information with goals in mind that I think everyone can understand. I mean, using less of something, not wasting something, it makes sense. I don't know anyone who wants to waste just for the sake of wasting, but saving. I mean, at the end of the day, whether you're saving time or saving money, I mean, saving makes sense to most people in this world. When it comes to trades, who are really one of the most important parts of the team, because they're the ones who are executing. We can sit around, we can draw great pictures, and we can come up with these fantastic models, and we can coordinate extremely well. But at the end of the day, I mean, if it isn't built the way that it's been designed, then all of that effort is lost. The trades need to understand the goal, and they need to also be given an opportunity to contribute to the design. If not, if they're just given a directive, they're going to operate without all the information that they need to do their job as well as they can. It's not a question of ability.
It's like, it's not my job.
Yeah,
not my job.
No question of ability.
Drives me nuts.
I mean, all of the trades that I've worked with recently, like they really care about the work that they do, but they need to know what they're doing or striving to do in the big picture first. Yeah. And so that's it. Involving all members of the design team as early in the planning, design, and construction process as possible is another imperative to a successful project. Whether you're striving for low levels of resource consumption in the building's ultimate operation or not, that's neither here nor there. I think the days of planners going away and getting approvals for land and then handing that land off to a designer to come up with a fantastic plan for a building, and then that designer passing off those plans to a builder to price and then coordinate construction. I mean, those are, in my mind, long gone. Yeah. I do not like working in that kind of step by step process. I'm much more interested in working with
a lot slower that way.
Ultimately it is. Yeah. A lot slower and more costly. It's been found that although there are elements of a high performance building might cost more. I mean, the heat recovery ventilator that I've got running in this home right now costs significantly more than the one that would satisfy the building code. And with that additional cost for that unit comes greater cost to the project overall. But there's also efficiencies found through the design process that integrates multiple heads, multiple experiences that offset some of that additional cost of potentially additional bits of equipment or higher levels of insulation. I mean, there's a trade-off there. The cost of building a custom residential home that at least performs, say, to the Passive House standard or the net zero energy level is offset significantly by other efficiencies that might need to be addressed much later in the process, but at greater cost than if and when we all get around the table early and say, oh, that pipe, that really shouldn't go there, that should go over here instead. And by running it over there, we're gonna save ourselves from these problems that ultimately cost time and money.
Yeah.
Than having to move it after it's been put in place.
Would you approach a renovation project differently than a custom home project?
I mean, certainly there's one major part of a renovation project that makes it really different than a new construction project, and that's the fact that there's additional constraints. They are more challenging.
The pipe is already there.
The pipe is already there, yeah.
You can't do anything about it.
Exactly. And
Well,
so a renovation project takes more time than a new construction project, from my perspective. So it's because I need to go in, and I'm not just working with a site that's not empty, but not working with a blank canvas. There's already a painting that's been painted on that canvas. Now I can go in with a roller, and I can just put a coat of paint on top of what's already there, or go into an existing home and gut it, and essentially start from close to scratch. But what am I throwing away in the process? And that's the question that I've asked many clients over the years is, what is the value of what's already there? What's the value in terms of embodied energy? What's the value in terms of the fact that this home might have been lived in by your parents, or by your grandparents, or by somebody's grandparents? What is the history of this building? And often enough, those values, those intrinsic values, not necessarily the financial ones, those mean things. Those mean things to people, and
that adds to the feeling of the overall project, for sure.
So renovations, more challenging. But apart from the additional constraints that they add to a process, the steps in the process really are this. Some might suggest that renovation projects are in some ways easier. And as I reflect on it, in some respects they are easier, in that they do introduce constraints that don't exist otherwise. I don't
From the design perspective, you mean?
There's only so much room to work within. The walls are already there, and you're designing a space to fit within those walls. You might be forced toward a particular solution to a puzzle more quickly than you would if you had the ability to play with where those walls are built.
Right.
I don't put time constraints on my clients when I work with them. I'll create a concept or a prospective solution to the puzzle. They'll consider it. They can take a day, a week, a month, or a year to consider that constraint before they come back to me with direction. And sometimes that direction is, well, let's put that one on the shelf and let's come up with some alternative, and I'll go away and I'll generate the alternative. And that iterative process of design that I like to engage in with my clients, sometimes it goes fast, and oftentimes it takes months to work through. But again, if constraints exist, then there's less opportunity for variation. And so from a design perspective, a renovation design can move more quickly in terms of the overall project timeline than a new construction might.
A little different on the construction side. I always tell, especially people trying to get into the construction industry or learning carpentry, I'm always like, work for a company that does renovations, because you're going to learn way more doing renovations than you will doing custom homes. There's other things about custom, but ripping apart a 100-year-old house and having to put it back together, way more opportunity.
We learn from sometimes the mistakes of the past.
Our
mistakes, the mistakes of those that worked before us. Sometimes we learn from the good decisions that have been made in the past by others. We see the things that used to be done as norms to build homes.
How is this still standing?
Just because it's old doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. There's a real simple elegance to the way that we used to build buildings.
That's one thing. Natasha and I have a conversation. She's both of us actually, we love old houses, just because of the story, because of the feeling walking into it. But then there's the other part of me that's just I just hate that we're basically heating the outside in the winter through some of these houses, right? But I know there's opportunity to kind of keep that character, and that's part of, if we were renovating, that would be a priority. It's keeping the character of the old house, but somehow making it more efficient.